What's going on, guys? It's your boy Nick, bringing today on the channel an update to my Metaphys Kashtira deck profile. This is a deck that I brought to the channel about a few months ago, right around when Kashtira was first released, I believe in Darkwing Blast, if I'm not mistaken. And it was pretty much just a different take on Metaphys, which is one of my favorite decks. For those of you who have watched my videos before, you've seen that I've uploaded various Metaphys deck profiles over the course of the channel's lifetime, and it's a deck that I always want to keep bringing to the channel because I feel like it never really gets a lot of the attention it deserves. I'm aware that the deck obviously isn't very good and it has its own inherent flaws as a pure archetype. Personally, I really do think that Metaphys needs to get fleshed out a bit more and Konami should really support for them. But, I mean, that's what everybody says about any of their favorite archetypes, obviously. But Metaphys, though, you know, the way the deck works is it likes to banish a lot of things. Now, because of that playstyle, there's not many other engines or archetypes that you can play with Metaphys that necessarily help them because not every deck wants their things banished. However, that doesn't really become an issue with the Kashtira cards, especially with the new support they just got out of Photon Hypernova. So I wanted to update the profile. Now, before we get into this profile, I'm going to preface a few things. I'm not saying that this is the most definitive Metaphys deck. It's just something that I've been toying with. And so far, I've been really liking what it can do. Haven't taken it to locals yet, but I've been testing a lot online and it's been doing fairly well. And another thing I want to say is this is not obviously a definitive Kashtira deck either. I'm not saying that this is the best Kashtira list. It's far from it. You know, obviously, Kashtira is powerful, but it's more powerful in a pure variant. Obviously, you know, playing it with Metaphys does drag down the consistency of the Kashtira package, I guess. So, like, I just want to preface that because I'm not saying that this is the end-all, be-all. This is just a really fun deck you can probably build and take to locals and have marginal success with. Anything beyond that, you know, like a regionals and above, you're probably going to struggle and, you know, see a lot of the flaws that the deck has inherently. Just because, you know, Metaphys can only do so much. So now that we got that out the way, for those of you new to the channel, welcome. My name is Nick. I focus on Yu-Gi-Oh! Content mainly focused around casual as well as rogue decks. I make live duel videos, deck profiles, I do deck discussions. If you're watching this right now and you haven't subscribed, I highly encourage you do so. I'm going to continue bringing you guys really cool and unique Yu-Gi-Oh! Content, and I focus on a lot of stuff that a lot of other YouTubers don't necessarily put time into, and I think that's what makes my channel stand out the most. So if you're watching this, please subscribe. Like I said, I'm working my way to that 1,000 subscriber benchmark. Like the video, leave a comment down below on what you think of this really cool and unique take on Metaphys. And for those of you who are huge Metaphys fans, hopefully you guys appreciate this particular list and can, appreciate some of the effort that I put in and some of the thought process of trying to put this deck together. So with that being said, we are going to dive straight into this profile. You know how we do here on the channel. We always start with the monsters first. So we are going to be playing triple copies of Metaphys Ragnarok. This is pretty much one of the key starters of this deck. For those of you who don't know what Ragnarok does, he's a level 4 Worm Tuner, and upon normal or special summon, he allows you to banish the top 3 cards of your deck face up. Now, Metaphys is an archetype that gets a lot of value when their cards get banished, and this is a card that helps enable that. The biggest flaw with this card is that this deck doesn't really have a way to stack, like the top of its deck, so to speak, so the banishes off of this card are usually random, and it leaves a lot of things up to chance. So there are times when this card can whiff, and when that happens, I'm not going to lie, it does feel pretty bad, but there's times when this card hits, like, straight gas and you feel almost unstoppable. So I have like a love-hate relationship with this card, but unfortunately this literally is the only starter that Metaphys has. So until they get further support, we kind of just have to roll with this. This card does have another effect where if it inflicts battle damage to the opponent, you can special summon a Metaphys monster from your deck. Now that effect is really cool because most of the high-level Metaphys monsters trigger their effects when special summoned by a Metaphys monster specifically. But we'll get into that shortly. But triple copies of Ragnarok, obviously, you want to see it, and it's definitely one of your more important normal summons of the deck. Moving on, we are playing 2 copies of Metaphys Decoy Dragon. Now, Decoy Dragon is the only other low-level monster that the Metaphys archetype has. This card's Pendulum effect and Monster effect are actually identical. It's kind of like a a battle trap of sorts, I guess. It is battle reliant, which in my opinion makes it not as good. But pretty much if the opponent selects one of your monsters as an attack target, you can banish the decoy dragon, whether it's in your pen zone or it's in the field as a monster. You banish it, and you can target one of your banished Metaphys monsters or a Metaphys monster that's in your graveyard and special summon it to your field. So like I said, it's kind of like a battle trap. I wish this card did more, but we play it just because, again, Metaphys doesn't have that many cards to their archetype, so you just want to have the additional name. Not only that, when this card is banished during the next standby phase, it'll actually special summon itself as a monster to your side of the field. So that is pretty cool. Outside of that, though, those are the only low-level monsters the Metaphys team has. Moving on to their high-level monsters, we play 2 copies of Nephthys. Now, Nephthys has 2 separate effects. It has an effect when banished, and it also has an effect when special summoned, specifically by the effect of a Metaphys monster. The banish effect states that during the next standby phase, after this card is banished, you shuffle this banished card into your deck as cost, and if you do, you can add a Metaphys card from the deck to your hand. So it's pretty much a roto for the theme, which is really cool. Secondary effect, again, only triggers when special summoned by a Metaphys monster, and that effect is, if this card is special summoned, you can banish all set spells and traps on the field. Sorry, I had a bit of a brain fart there. So this card is pretty much like an archetype, like Duster of sorts, except instead of destroying all spells and traps, it banishes. However, it can only banish set spells and traps. So, like, I wish this card just, like, didn't really care if they were set or not. I wish it just banished all the back row, but maybe I'm asking for too much. But either way, you play this card as a 2-of in the list. It's really good, to special summon off of Ragnarok's effect and, like, blow out the rest of their back row for trying to push for game, which is pretty cool. So 2 copies of that. Then we play triple copies of Metaphys Daedalus. We're playing 3 copies in this particular version because, well, Daedalus is level 7, and as you already know, Kashtira loves level 7 monsters. But Daedalus, again, like Nephthys, has 2 effects, one when banished and one when it's special summoned by the effect of a Metaphys monster. The banished effect is you can shuffle this card during the next standby phase back into the main deck as cost, and if you do, you can banish a Metaphys card from your deck. So this helps you, like, banish other resources and helps you toolbox certain things. Then, if it's special summoned by the effect of a Metaphys monster, you get to banish all special summon monsters on the field. So that is non-target, non-destruction removal on a 2600 body, which is huge. So again, using cards like Ragnarok, if it inflicts damage to the opponent, you can special summon this card and then banish all special summon monsters on the field. Again, just clearing the board and paving the way for you to, like, close out the duel. So 3 copies of that, really strong card. Then we play 1 copy of Tyrant Dragon. In my opinion, this is arguably the worst one of the bunch. However, it's still worth at least playing the 1 copy. It has, again, 2 effects, just like Nephthys and Daedalus. The effect that triggers when banished, it can shuffle itself back into the main deck for cost on the next standby phase, and then it allows you to special summon a Metaphys monster from your hand. Now, this is also cool at summoning out some of your larger Metaphys monsters like Nephthys and Daedalus from hand, and because they're being summoned by the effect of a Metaphys monster, it is able to trigger their activated effects, which is really cool. The problem is that this card requires setup. And like I was saying with Ragnarok, since the banishing 3 off the top of the deck isn't really controlled, like you're just banishing 3 random cards, there are times when you banish the Tyrant Dragon too early, and if you don't have a Metaphys in hand to summon, on the next standby the effect kind of whiffs, and you're not able to shuffle it back into the deck because you don't have a valid target to summon. So that's why we're just playing 1 of this, because despite it giving you access to special some of your other Metaphys monsters, it's a card that requires setup, which, isn't inherently that good. The secondary effect, if it's special summoned by the effect of a Metaphys card, or a monster, he's unaffected by trap cards, and he can make up to 2 attacks on monsters in a row. Or if he attacks a monster, he can attack again in a row. That second attack can be a direct attack, which is cool. So he's a pretty big beat stick at 2900. But like I said, he's just the 1-off slot. You don't really need to play more of him because he can be a little situational at times. So that rounds out the Metaphys portion of the deck. Now we're going to look into the Kashtira portion. So we start off with triple copies of Kashtira Fenrir. I'm not going to dive too hard into detail with these cards. A lot of you should know how they work. If you've played locals recently, you probably are sick of seeing Fenrirs, to be quite honest. But it's a level 7 Earth Psychic monster. It special summons itself if you control no monsters. All the Kashtiras, they have that same clause. And then during your main phase, you can add a Kashtira monster from the deck to your hand. And if your opponent activates a monster effect, or if the Kashtira Fenrir declares battle, you can target a face-up card they control and banish it face down. And that's a once per turn effect. It's not a quick effect, it's a trigger effect, and that's something I think a lot of people misconstrue. Fenrir is not a quick effect. It has to activate on a new chain after resolution of an opponent's activated monster effect, or once an attack has been declared, with Fenrir specifically. So overall, you play 3 of it. It's very important to the Kashtira package overall, but I would argue that the more important card, even more so than Fenrir, is the triple copies of Kashtira Unicorn. This card by itself is pretty much a 1-card starter. It special summons itself if you control monsters, just like Fenrir does. Note that special summon effect is not once per turn, so like if you summon a Unicorn, the opponent like Torrential Tributes, for example, and you have like another Unicorn or another Fenrir in hand, you can special them because they're not once per turn to summon, which is crazy. But during your main phase, Unicorn lets you add a Kashtira spell from the deck to your hand. And then if the opponent activates a monster effect, or if the Unicorn declares an attack, you get to look at their extra deck and banish 1 card from it face down. That is one of the most toxic effects I think I've ever read in Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, the fact that not only does it give you deck knowledge of what your matchup is, but you're just sniping out like the best cards out of their extra deck, or purposely sniping out cards that you know are a threat to you, pretty much guaranteeing that you're going to win that duel because like you're taking away your opponent's outs basically. It's kind of like broken. Like it feels really degenerate. Like I'm going to be honest, like Kashtira is a deck that when I play, I personally don't really get that much enjoyment out of playing it because it just seems like such a sacky like play strategy and like but that's my own opinion. Obviously the deck works and Unicorn's crazy, but I don't know. You Kashtira players are a different breed because I don't know how you guys do it. But moving on, we play 1 copy of Ogre. I know a lot of Kashtira lists don't run this card anymore. I still think Ogre is fine as a 1-of. It's still a free extender, and during the main phase, he lets you add a Kashtira trap from deck to hand. And then when your opponent activates a monster effect, or if an attack or if Ogre declares an attack, you can look at up to the top 5 cards of their main deck and banish 1 card from it face down. Again, not as good as Unicorn or Fenrir, obviously, but still a really cool extender and a big body on top of that at 2800, so we still play this as a 1-of in the deck list. So that rounds out the Kashtira monsters. Now, for the rest of the monsters we main deck, it's just like a bunch of utility cards. So we main deck triple copies of Necroface. Necroface in this deck is absolutely crazy. If you banish it off of like Ragnarok, for example, Necroface triggers and then both players banish the top 5 cards of their deck. This card is almost like the Shizu cards. It's almost like a Guido or a Kelbeck, except instead of milling 5, it's banishing 5 off the top of both players' decks. And it's not once per turn, which is nuts. So there's times when you can hit a Necroface, and off of that hit a Necroface, and off of that hit another Necroface, and you literally banish 15 cards off the top of each player's deck. The difference is that I want my stuff banished. Usually the opponent doesn't. So Necroface can become pretty crazy in that regard. Also, if he's normal summoned, he has a mandatory effect. He has to shuffle all banished cards into their respective owners' decks, and then he gains 100 attack for each banished card shuffled into the main decks by that effect. That is mandatory. There are certain instances where you want to actually do that, especially like late game if you're kind of low on resources. Necroface is a card that you can just summon, reset the decks basically, and then get a big free beat stick out of it, which is cool. So triple copies of Necroface. Then we play 2 copies of Aloof Lupine, who is arguably our second best starter behind Ragnarok. Aloof Lupine's nice because when it's normal summoned, you get to banish a monster from your hand for cost. So even if Aloof gets negated, you still banish from hand, which in some cases is beneficial because if you banish a Metaphys, you can guarantee it'll triggers in the next standby. Or if you banish a Kashtira, it makes cards like Birth live, and we'll get into what Birth is once we get to the spells. But anyway, you banish a monster from hand for cost, and then if it resolves, you banish a monster from deck with the same type as that monster. Note that if you have a Necroface in hand, you can actually go Aloof, banish a Necroface from hand to banish another Necroface from deck, since they have the same type, and then trigger double Necroface in that actual on a new chain, which is nuts. And then if the Aloof is destroyed by an opponent's card effect or by battle, you can target a banished monster, add it to your hand. So 2 copies of Aloof, like I said, a very nice secondary starter for this deck. We only play 5 normal summons. It's just the triple rag and the 2 copies of Aloof. And I found that ratio was absolutely perfect. But rounding out the rest of the monsters, we play 1 Chaos Mirage Dragon. This is brand new out of the Photon Hypernova set. This is part of the new Chaos support that we recently got. Now this card is a really nice one of. It's not really a starter, but it's very good mid to late game because what you can do is you can target a banished light or dark monster and special summon it to your field but negate its effects. Also, for the rest of this turn, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except light or dark synchro monsters. So this card, while it does lock you into synchros, can enable some really cool synchro plays mid to late game as long as you can revive a light or a dark from the banish zone, because this card is a tuner. And then if this card is sent to the graveyard as synchro material, you can target cards your opponent controls up to the number of other monsters used for this card synchro summon and banish them. So really cool as a one of tech choice. It's kind of like almost like another copy of Ragnarok, except it like brings a banished card back rather than banishing stuff off the top of your deck. So as a one of, it's fine. Not really a starter, but it can be, you know, mid to late game. So we played as a one of, and with the one of, I've liked that ratio pretty well. Then we play the one Nemesis Keystone. This is nice because if it's banished during the end phase, it comes back to your hand, and then it's pretty much a free extender by targeting a banished monster, shuffling it into the deck, and you special this card from hand. So this is nice. Again, mid to late game, this card becomes really powerful, being able to cycle back stuff like cards like Necroface back into your main deck and whatnot. So one copy of Keystone, and then to round out the monsters we main deck, we just play triple copies of Dimension Shifter as our hand trap of choice. Obviously this deck likes banishing things, so it literally main decking Shifter just makes sense for this list. I'm aware that Shifter is not as good as it was last format, because not as many decks care about it, but it's still worth the main deck slot, at least in this particular deck in my opinion, just because how much they actually want their stuff banished. So that rounds out the monsters. Now we're going to dive into the spells. We played triple copies of Kashtira Theosis. This is the brand new Kashtira spell card out of Hypernova. Basically, it's like almost like an emergency teleport for Kashtira. What you do is you target a Kashtira monster you control, then you special summon a Kashtira monster with a different attribute from your deck in defense position. But for the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except Xyz monsters. So this is what I was saying, how Unicorn becomes a one-card combo, because Unicorn can search this, and then this lets you special another cash from deck, and then that particular Kashtira gets you a search, and then it kind of snowballs from there. What I like about this card, though, the most is the fact that it has a really good effect when it's banished. And that's pretty hard to find in a card, because it's one of the things, for those of you who've tried to build Metaphys in the past, it's very hard to find a balance of cards you want to draw versus cards you want banished. Because usually, like, you'll find a card that's good and you want to see, or you'll find a card that's good and you want banished, but, like, you can never find a card that's both. Like, usually the card that you want banished is probably not a card you want to draw, and vice versa. Like, the card you want to draw probably isn't the card you want banished. So it's very difficult to find a card that functions both good to draw and is good to banish, because if this card is banished, you get to target a banished Kashtira card, accept a copy of itself, and add it to your hand. So this is finally a really good way to bridge the Kashtira and Metaphys archetypes even closer together, because now Kashtira is a card that, like, if you banish this off of a Ragnarok effect, you can gain really good value back and finally have like a good, nice card to add from the banish zone back to hand. So we played triple copies of this, and overall it's been working really, really great. Obviously, I'm sure if you haven't figured this out by now, this deck isn't necessarily budget. So for those of you who are fans of Metaphys and want to try and build this, unfortunately, there isn't really a way to build this deck without spending a decent amount of money, because the Kashtira cards are just inherently so expensive. So my apologies for that if you were expecting this to be a budget list. It is not. But anyway, moving on. We played 2 copies of Kashtira Birth, probably one of the best Kashtira spells. It allows you to normal summon level 7 monsters without tributing. Then during the main phase, you can special summon a Kashtira monster that is banished or in your graveyard. And then another effect that a lot of people tend to overlook is if your opponent activates a spell card or spell effect and you control a Kashtira monster, you can target 3 cards in the opponent's graveyard, banish them face down. So we own 2 copies of Birth, a very good extender. Then we played 2 copies of Dimensional Fissure. We cut it down from the 3 of that we were playing in the previous list to 2 in this current list, simply because we just needed the space for other cards. And in my personal opinion, Dimensional Fissure, even though it's at 3, doesn't really have as much impact as it did in tier format, because a lot of the decks now in the meta don't really care all that much if their stuff's banished. I'm thinking of decks like Kashtira, obviously, and decks like Branded. Even Labyrinth, to an extent, probably won't care about something like this. So we played it at 2, and with that ratio, I feel like it's been working out fine. Then we played 2 copies of Sacred Sword of 7 stars. This is just serves as draw power for the deck, and it banishes for cost, which is actually good, because a lot of the time we want that, and we just get to draw 2 cards, so who doesn't want draw power? And then for the last spell we main deck is 1 copy of Goldsark. This card is absolutely crazy in this deck. It gives you a lot of advantage. You can banish cards like Necroface off of it, and then trigger the Necroface to banish 5 off the top of each player's deck, and that could probably get you into some combos. So 1 copy of Goldsark is really cool. And then moving on to the traps, we're on 2 copies of Metaphys Ascension. This card is pretty good. Basically, you discard a Metaphys card for cost, and then you draw a card, and then you can banish a Metaphys monster from the deck. So that's the on-field effect. So it's a discard to draw, and then you get to banish a Metaphys from deck, which is pretty cool. And then if this card is banished, you get to add a Metaphys card from the deck to your hand, except a copy of itself. So this is another card that's both not too bad to draw, and also really good to banish. So 2 copies of Ascension. The only reason why we're on 2 of it is because it is a hard once per turn. So if you banish duplicates, you can only resolve like 1 of them, which is a little unfortunate, but it is what it is. Then we play 1 copy of Metaphys Dimension. Pretty much the best effect on this card is while this card is face up in the spell trap zone, if another Metaphys card in your possession is banished, you get to target a card on the field and banish it. So that's pretty much why we run this. It has another effect like that allows you to special summon Metaphys monsters that are banished or in your grave, but it seldom comes up. And the sad thing about it is that if you're summoning cards like Daedalus or Tyrant Dragon or Neptus off of this, you're not triggering their effects because it's not being special summoned by a Metaphys monster. They're being special summoned by a Metaphys trap. I don't know like why this card couldn't trigger their effects. Again, Konami building nerfs into their cards when like they don't even need it. And then for the last card we main deck is 1 copy of Kashtira Preparations, which is just the continuous trap card that Kashtira plays. It allows us to rip cards out of the opponent's hand potentially, and also lets us special summon Kashtira monsters from our hand, or that are banished, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, so that rounds out the main deck, guys. It's a 42 card list. Now we're going to jump right into the extra deck, which I think is pretty unique. We're going to lead things off with a copy of Trishula, Dragon of Icy Imprisonment. This is pretty cool because we can contact fuse into this card by banishing 3 monsters on the field with different names. Obviously, it has to be monsters that we control, but we can banish our monsters we have to contact fuse into this. And generally, like, it's pretty cool to surprise our opponent with this because let's say we have like a Necroface on field or a Metaphys monster or even a Kashtira. We can banish all 3 of them, summon this, trigger Necroface, banish 5 more. Then if we have like Births on field, for example, we can go Birth, revive back to banish Kashtira, and combo off from there. The only thing that would make this card better is if it was a level 7. It's level 9, so there's not that much synergy with the deck list, but I think it's cool. It's a tech choice in my opinion. Then we play 1 copy of Metaphys Horus. Shout out to the Ultimate Rare. This card is a very cool synchro. Basically, it has different effects based on the material used to summon it. It can become unaffected, or it can target another face-up card in the field and negate that card's effects permanently. Or you can force your opponent to give control of 1 monster they have to you, and that's also a permanent steal. And it forces the opponent to make the choice. So even if the monster's unaffected and it's the only card they have to give it to you, which is crazy. So 1 copy of Horus. 1 Chaos Beast. Again, this is a new Chaos support that came out on Hypernova. We actually don't have a way to hard make this in the deck. How we summon Chaos Beast is through the effect of Chaos Archfiend, which is another brand new Chaos Synchro out of Hypernova. We summon the Archfiend using cards like not Tyrant Dragon. Using cards like Ragnarok and also something like an Aloof Lupine or a Necroface, for example. This is a really cool level 8 Synchro. And if a card or cards was banished this turn, he gains 2,000 attack, so he can jump to 4,500. He can attack all monsters the opponent controls, and then any monster he destroys by battle gets banished instead, which is really cool. And if he leaves the field because of an opponent's card, we get to summon a Chaos Beast from the extra deck, which is really nice. This card gains 1,000 attack during the turn a card was banished, so you can jump to 3k. And then he can pretty much like during the main phase, we can special summon a banished light or dark monster or add it to our hand, which is pretty cool. So that's our Chaos package in the extra deck. Then moving on, obviously Metaphys Ragnarok is a level 4 tuner, and Kashtiras are level 7 monsters, so we can make level 11s pretty easily in this deck. So our 2 level 11s of choice are a copy of Star Eater and a Psychic End Punisher, just 2 really powerful level 11 monsters. Again, shoutouts to the Ultimate Rare Star Eater, I think it looks absolutely cool. Then for the last synchro we play is 1 copy of Geomathemic Final Sigma. Sometimes it's just funny to watch your opponent struggle to out this, because once you put this in the extra monster zone, it's unaffected by all card effects. So a lot of times the players don't really have an out to that. Then for our Xyz monsters, we play the 1 Shangri Era. It lets us special summon Kashtiras from deck during the standby phase. It can block out the opponent's zones. This card is just nuts. To those of you who have lost to this, I know the pain. Then we play the 1 Kashtira Arise Heart, brand new out of the Hypernova core set. This is just an insane boss monster. It's a Macrocosmos on legs. And it can like quick effect banish cards face down from field and can attach banished cards to itself once per chain. It's just nuts. This card does like the most for no reason. Then we play 1 number 89 Diablosis the Mind Hacker, pretty much a honorary Kashtira card at this point. Being able to also look through your opponent's extra deck, rip cards out of it is nuts. And then 1 copy of Dark Armed the Dragon of Annihilation. This card is very cool synergy with this deck because when you pop a card, you get to banish a card from your graveyard, and a lot of the times the cards you're banishing from grave generate you advantage. So in this particular list, this card actually puts in a lot of work. Then to round out the extra deck, we play 4 Link monsters, 1 Donner Dagger for Hire, just as a generic Link 2, 1 IP Masquerena, again, just to help us Link climb, and then 1 Topologic Trisbana, followed by a Topologic Zeraboros. 2 very strong boss monsters that we can make in this deck list. Zeraboros just being absolutely nuts. Being able to gain 200 attack for each banished card and then being able to nuke the entire board is also really strong. So that rounds out the extra deck, guys. Real quick, before I wrap things up, we're going to look through the side deck real fast. I'm on triple copies of Kirikara, the Divine Incarnate. This is just to hedge, help us against the, going into the mirror match with another Kashtira deck. So triple copies of that. We're on triple copies of Dark Hole. I think this card is very underutilized this format. Yes, I'm aware that cards like Shangri Era can protect itself, but none of the other Kashtira cards have built-in protection, so nuke away, my friends, nuke away. Then we play triple copies of Crossout Designator. This card actually, in this side deck, or in this particular list, has a lot of viability because you can declare Metaphys names with this, and since the Metaphys monsters don't trigger their effects till the following standby, Designator kind of functions like a 2nd, 3rd, and 4th copy of Goldsark to an extent, which is pretty cool. But the reason why we side these cards is because we can run these in, again, the mirror match. Since we play Kashtiras, if the opponent's on a Kashtira deck, we can side this in post game 1 and then start calling Kashtira names, and they can, it's almost like imperms at that point because like you just negate whatever the hell they use, which is pretty cool as a tech choice. Then we play triple copies of Twin Twisters just to help out against our back row decks. And then for the last card on the side, because time in the round does suck, we're on triple copies of Soul Absorption just so we can gain insane amounts of life. So that's it for the deck profile, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the update to my Metaphys Kashtira list. Stay tuned because I will be doing a combo tutorial and test hand video on this particular deck pretty soon. But with that being said, thank you guys so much. Again, like the video, comment down below what you thought, and subscribe if you haven't already.